Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by Samantha Dowles. You're a South Bend resident. And I came across you because obviously the Mayor Pete has been quite a news topic the last week or two. And I saw some activity on Twitter, and then I reached out to you because to me, obviously there's been talk about his relationship or lack thereof relationship with the African American community in South Bend. There hasn't been as much talk just about what the heck has he done in South Bend, Indiana, as far as economic growth, closing the income gap, opportunity for low income residents. And the more I've looked into it, it looks like this image he's portrayed as far as the next generation of leadership. If you look at how his administration and he has acted in South Bend, seems a lot like the old generation of leadership. So I wanted to start. He had his outgoing, I guess, address this past Monday in South Bend because his term is up as mayor, and there was quite a lot of heavy-handedness with that. Can you kind of tell us about that?
Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting observation you make, though, and making the point that it seems a lot like the old generation of leadership because it most certainly is. The same people are still in control. Make no mistake about that. So Monday night was the Common Council meeting, the City Council meeting. It was a regular meeting. It actually went till midnight. It was pretty long. I think the public portion started at 7. So there were some items. There was an item on the agenda that outgoing Councilwoman Regina Williams Preston. It was a resolution she was presenting before the council to honor some local activists, not just activists, but groups and nonprofits. Quite a few people were named on that resolution. And early in the day, Monday, word got around that council president, who was reelected for another term, Tim Scott, had been emailing with the council. Some of those emails were leaked, and it was revealed that he basically was telling Regina that he was removing it from the agenda.
And
And
just so the audience knows, she actually ran against Mayor Pete. Is that
she did.
or excuse me, she ran for mayor this time around.
Yes, she did.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, she did. So, of course, word got around to some local activists, and there was a lot of chatter. So we were discussing how we were going to handle that. To be quite honest, I had the agenda for the meeting, and I didn't even notice that Pete was going to be there at the time. So we kind of rallied the troops, and some of us prepared signs, and we were going to be present at the meeting. There was some last minute communication that allegedly Councilwoman Sharon McBride, right before the council meeting started, had said that the item was back on the agenda and it was going to go forward and the council would vote on it publicly, the resolution to honor these people. So when we got to, well, actually, let me back up. So I brought a friend of mine and my uncle with me to the meeting. These are both actually the friend I brought. She holds an elected seat in St. Joseph County in one of the townships. So when we were on our way there, I received a phone call from a local activist, a watchdog, if you will. And he said, "Hey, I'm here, and I just got stopped at the door by the St. Joseph County Sheriff's Department, who let me know that there will be no signs let into the building or the meeting." And of course, thank God, Jesse Davis is the activist I'm speaking of. He doesn't take anything lying down. So, he gave him some pushback and he said, "Well, what are you talking about? That's our First Amendment right if we want to bring signs into a public meeting." And he said, if Jesse told the deputy, I guess, if you go through with trying to stop people from bringing signs in here, it's not going to go, it's not going to be good for you guys. It's
And
like
did
exactly what they
and was
said.
it known at this point that Mayor Pete would be speaking?
Yes, it was on the agenda. It was just
Okay.
me personally that didn't
Okay.
realize it at the time, I guess. I tend to get laser focused on things. So yeah, so no, it was well known that Mayor Pete would be there. And I had prepared signs myself, and one of them was actually directed at Mayor Pete. So anyhow, so Jesse said, if you think you're going to stop some of these people from bringing signs in, it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to end well for you guys. To which the deputy responded, "No, it's not going to end well for them." And he was putting his foot down. He said, "There are no signs going up that elevator, period." So
And
Jesse,
and I assume that the signs were not so favorable to Pete.
at that point, they had no idea what the signs would say, really. actually, me and my friend are the ones who brought signs, and we weren't even there yet. So I think they anticipated. I did post some pictures of the signs as I was making them earlier in the day to my social media, and I know that law enforcement and the leadership of South Bend, the city of South Bend, they're aware of my social media. I'm quite vocal. So they probably had an idea there were some signs coming that wouldn't be favorable to Pete or some of the council representatives. So Jesse stepped outside and gave me a phone call. He said, "Hey, this is what's going on." I said, "Well, I'll be there in about 5 minutes, and I'll have my signs with me. And the signs are either going up to the council chambers or they'll go with me to the St. Joe County Jail. We can do this however they want." I said, "I'm going to walk in there with my signs, and if they ask me, what's that, or try to take them, I'll say, it's my property. You don't have a warrant, and this is my First Amendment. Kick rocks." We're not going to have that. So that's what we were prepared for. My friend and my uncle and a couple of the other activists and community members who were en route who also received this news. We were prepared for it, and within about 10 minutes then of that phone call, and prior to us arriving, we received another phone call from Jesse that said that Sheriff Redmond, this is his first year actually. He was elected last year. I guess he came down, and some of Pete's people came down and said that it was a miscommunication. Of course, signs are allowed, no worries, whatever. But even let's give him the benefit of the doubt that this one deputy was misinformed on the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. It doesn't surprise me at all that happened.
Well, you have a backdrop because we're not just talking now about the local South Bend, Indiana City Council. You have Pete leading in some Iowa polls, leading in some New Hampshire polls. On Monday, he was getting a lot of national heat. He wouldn't release the client list for his clients that worked at McKinsey. He was, at that point, had not pledged to let press into his fundraisers. So, sounds like, from his campaign, they didn't want any more bad optics. But activists weren't having any of it. Does that kind of sound like that's what was going on?
Well, yeah, exactly. I don't mean to sound crass, but we don't really care that Pete's running for president. Pete has had problems here at home in South Bend the entire time he's been mayor. He's largely ignored the worst of them, racism and corruption within the government and the police department. So, these things aren't just going to go away now that Mayor Pete's term is up and he's moved on from South Bend. All these things are still here. It's still happening. The chief of police is still in place. The Common Council of South Bend, although many seats turned over in the elections last month, I have to be honest with you, the majority of the local activists in the area are not happy with the results of that election at all whatsoever. So there's a lot we still are left here dealing with and facing the results of the investigation into the murder of Eric Logan by a South Bend police officer with a known racist history. That's been pushed back. They're telling us it could be even February before we hear anything, which a lot of us think is absurd. We have the South Bend police tape scandal that's been creeping along and for years, and we're nowhere near a resolution on that. So all of these things remain in place, even though Pete's going to ride off into the sunset for whatever reason.
And it's my understanding you supported Pete originally, but he kind of ran for mayor. A lot of the same themes you hear him running is presidential, like I'm young, new generation. He ran on a lot of those themes, and you supported him at first, but you've evolved because it seems like what he's done in South Bend, or more importantly, how he's operated, has kind of been as part of that old boys club. Can you kind of talk more about that?
Absolutely. That's exactly what it's been. So Pete obviously was a two-term mayor, and I didn't live in South Bend at the time he was originally elected. My family and I moved to Texas for 2 years, but we came back in 2011. We were thrilled when we came back after being gone for 2 years. We saw a lot of improvements downtown, a lot of things happening. And we thought, oh, wow, this new mayor, not only is he young and stylish and, seems to, really have his finger on the pulse of South Bend, and he's doing all these great things. So we were excited. We were, me and my 2 teenage daughters were his biggest fan at one point. I mean, I have pictures on my computer of Pete and his husband posing with my daughters at various events around South Bend. When Pete was here with when Mark Zuckerberg came to visit Pete, and they were live streaming on Facebook, driving around South Bend. My daughters and I hopped in the car, and we met him along some of the points, and we were super excited. And then as time went on, though, I started to look around and realize, hey, man, there's a lot going on downtown. There's a lot of lights and new shiny buildings and a lot of high dollar housing and, stuff like that going on around downtown. But I'm not seeing a whole lot happening in the neighborhoods. Crime has been at an all-time high.
Can I just want to dial down on one point, because we know Mark Zuckerberg has met with him recently. You're saying that Mark Zuckerberg came there before he ran for president.
Yeah, at least maybe 2 years ago.
Okay.
Maybe more than 2 years ago. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can look that up.
Yeah.
They were live on Facebook, and Pete gave him a tour of South Bend. Even took him to the juvenile justice facility, which is nothing to brag about.
Mm-hmm.
So I started looking around like, man, our neighborhoods are going to pot. About a year ago, I started a list, and it was a list of dead or critically wounded teenagers by gunfire in South Bend just since Mayor Pete took office. And the numbers and the names and the ages, it's astounding. So to hear him, tooting his horn about all the great things he's done in South Bend, he's done a lot of really great things for people of his class. There are a lot of things to attract wealthy people who don't live here yet. And then thus he's turned his back on the generations of hardworking people who have built and sustained South Bend. And that's a real problem. You hear a lot about his 1,000 houses in 1,000 days or whatever that was. And it's been many years now since that's happened. So we now have the benefit of looking back on what the outcome of that was. And on one hand, you have Mayor Pete's administration and some of his supporters saying it's revitalization, when you look at it, it's really gentrification is what's happened. Everybody, you can go on Facebook Marketplace, go on Craigslist, go to the regular places on the internet where you might look for a rental home in your community. Do that in South Bend. I challenge you to do that in South Bend. The housing in South Bend just overall for low-income people is being completely wiped out. There was a story just over the summer. There's an apartment complex right down the street from where I live, down Western Avenue. It's called Western Manor. It's low-income apartments, lower-income apartments. They're older and major need of repairs, absolutely. And, come to find out over the summer, some investment group has now purchased it. They jacked the rent up effective September 1st by about $200 per unit. The residents called on their councilman, Oliver Davis, and Mayor Pete to help them. And there were some press conferences and there was some talking about it and some outrage about it. But as per usual in South Bend, everything went through. The rent was increased. And for the first 2 weeks of September, every time I drove past there on my way to the local Kroger, there was just moving truck after moving truck. The dumpsters were overflowing with people just discarding their items and getting the heck out of there. And where did they go? I mean, where did they go? There was nowhere for those people to go. Notre Dame bought up a lot. You might want to cut this part out, but I'm kind of rambling. But Notre Dame, at one point, they bought up a lot of houses and neighborhoods, lower income as well, demolished them, and now it's just multi-million-dollar houses all over that area. Where did those people go? So it's just displacement after displacement of South Bend's low income and people of color and minorities. And then you couple that with the South Bend Police Department and the racism and corruption is so deeply embedded and has been for so long in the South Bend Police Department. And it's astounding that even with Mayor Pete being on the national stage and running for president, that we're still just getting the same slap in the face when it comes to issues of corruption and racism in our police department. And ultimately ended up with the death of a black man this past June. Eric Logan was killed by Sergeant Ryan O'Neill, and Ryan O'Neill chose not to turn his body camera on. And when the city of South Bend and the South Bend Police Department released Sergeant O'Neill's personnel file to the media, there were missing documents. And I know there were missing documents because I had possession of those documents, namely 2 write-ups about 2 white officers who had reported O'Neill back in 2008 for making racist remarks. Why were these left out of his personnel file? And I know they were because when I started posting them on social media, the media started contacting me. Hey, where did you get those documents? What is that? Where did that come from? So then the city was forced to respond to that. And of course, it was some cockamamie story about how, oh, we investigated it back when it happened. The two brand new officers who reported O'Neill took polygraph tests and were found to have been lying. So that's why we left it out. It was not substantiated. Yet both of those officers who were rookies back in 2008, who reported their training officer for making racist remarks, both have been promoted. One just made lieutenant last month.
So
we get all these answers from the city that just don't make sense. And that's how Pete's administration does business. They just lie.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.